this video we're going to be taking a look at how to pass in-tray exercises. So the first thing to do when you're attempting an in-tray exercise is to read the background information. When heading into the in-tray assessment, it's vital that you understand the role that you'll be playing during the exercise. Everything you need to know about the role you're taking on will be made clear in the background information stage of the in-tray assessment. This will usually include your job title, the scenario, key upcoming events, the names and positions of colleagues, and more. This section may also include details on company policy or other protocols which you might need to know during the assessment. Many people might be tempted to briefly skim the background information, or skip it altogether since the clock is ticking. However, the in-tray assessment is about more than simply completing the tasks. The assessors want you to show that you are capable of reading, interpreting, and implementing information to arrive at the best courses of action and correct answers. For this reason, you must read the background information closely so you pick up all of the key information. If it helps, underline or circle key points so you can refer to them quickly. If the background information is quite dense, quickly write down some notes containing the key details so you can refer to them easily. This way, you won't have to keep trawling through the entire background information section of the exercise while completing the tasks. Next, prioritize your tasks. Generally speaking, there are 3 criteria which you should use in order to prioritize your tasks. First is urgency. The closer the deadline, the sooner it needs to be done. As a rule, you shouldn't leave any of these tasks until the last minute, because you never know if another task might appear and take precedence. Complete tasks based on their urgency as much as possible. Next, we have size and complexity. The bigger a document, or the more complex a task, the more time it's going to take to complete it effectively. You should try and complete the bigger tasks as soon as possible so you can get them out of the way, making room for the smaller tasks. Next, we have importance. This is slightly more abstract from the other criteria, since the importance of a task will depend on your scenario. For example, if you receive a task from the director of the company you're working for, then it might take precedence over a task assigned by a teammate. There's no real trick to this. Just use your own judgment to figure out which tasks are more important than others. Next, we have read every item before starting. While a lot of the key information will be supplied in the background information document, there might be more key details in the other items for the entire exercise. Therefore, it's important that you read every document before you get started, since some new information in a document could change everything about how you approach the tasks. In addition, reading every item before getting started allows you to prioritize everything effectively. You don't have to read each piece closely before starting, since you'll do that later, but at least skim through each document for important details before starting on anything. Remember that some tasks can be delegated. You don't have to complete every task yourself. In some cases, you'll have the opportunity to delegate tasks to other members of staff. Of course, these aren't actual people, but if you can justify why you're assigning the tasks to them, then this is acceptable. As part of the background information package, you might be given a chart listing relevant staff members at the company. While this can be used for completing tasks, such as figuring out who to forward a letter to, you might also be allowed to assign a task to a relevant staff member. For example, you receive a note asking you to deal with a refund request. The company policy states that all refund requests must be processed by Katie, the head of quality assurance at the company. In this case, it would be completely acceptable to delegate the task to her to complete. In some cases, you might be asked to find a suitable individual to assign a specific task to. For example, your manager might have noticed that there was an issue with the office printer and someone is required to get in touch with the manufacturer to resolve the problem. Your manager may specifically ask you to deal with this, or they might suggest that you find someone else to do it. In this case, you would try to find an individual with the clearest schedule as well as the best qualifications for the role. In other cases, you might not be asked to delegate a task, but it's appropriate given your workload or qualification. If this is the case, try to find an individual who is most suited for the task. There aren't always right or wrong answers. In some cases, there isn't a right or wrong solution to the task given. Instead, the assessors are trying to figure out what your course of action would be, and more importantly, why you've chosen it. In the post-exercise interview, the assessors might ask you to explain your choice of actions for some questions. For this reason, you should always know why you've chosen a specific course of action over another. It might be the case that neither answer is right or wrong. The assessor just wants to get an idea about how you think and rationalize decisions. Next is don't make assumptions. One thing you absolutely must not do when completing a task is jump to a conclusion. This can result in answers which aren't properly justified, which in turn can reflect negatively on your performance in the post-exercise interview. All of the information you need in order to make a decision is there in the documents you've been given. Your job is to deduce, interpret, and evaluate data in order to reach conclusions. If there's a piece of data that you can't find, then take another look through your material. It might be the case that you've simply missed it on previous readings. In some cases, data might intentionally be omitted from the documents. For example, you might be asked to decide which business plan to move ahead with in the next year. You might have complete data for Plan A, but incomplete or inclusive data for Plan B. In this case, the real task might be to acknowledge that Plan B's data is inconclusive, and therefore Plan B should not be considered as the correct course of action. Be prepared to read between the lines. While assumptions should be avoided as much as possible, there will be a number of cases where you have to read between the lines to glean important information. As mentioned in the previous video, there are sometimes hidden themes in an in-tray exercise that you'll need to figure out in order to achieve the best mark. By reading between the lines, you have the best chance of finding these themes. For example, one theme in the in-tray exercise may be that the company is considering acquiring another smaller company in the near future. This might not be made explicit to you, but might instead be implied by the type of information that you're given. For example, you might be given a report listing predicted revenue for the company in the current or next financial year, combined with a list of smaller companies in the same industry. On top of this, the director of the company might hint that major changes are coming to the structure of the company, which in turn suggests that a merger or acquisition is set to take place. While this might not be obvious, some deduction based on evidence might lead you to a hidden detail which can completely change the exercise. Next, keep an eye on the clock. Time management is a vital skill in most jobs, and the in-tray exercise is designed to test it. If you let time run away from you, you put yourself at risk of not completing all of the tasks. This will obviously reflect poorly on your application, so it's important that you master your time management skills. As previously mentioned, a surefire way of maintaining good time management is to keep track of all the deadlines for all of your tasks, and then prioritize them accordingly. This means that you have the maximum amount of possible time for each task, giving you more time to spend on them and decreasing your chances of accidentally missing the deadline. Make sure to prioritize your work. Secondly, a great way of managing your time is to put aside tasks that you're stuck on and return to them later. It's completely understandable to find some tasks tougher than others, but it's important that you don't waste time being stuck on a task. Instead, put the task to one side and move on to another which might be a bit easier. This way, you're maximizing your productivity. If you have time later, you can return to the tougher questions and see if completing the other tasks has helped your position at all. And finally, keep calm. Above all else, it's important to keep calm. Your mind is the thing that processes all of the information in the exercise. Therefore, if your mind isn't in the right place, it'll be more difficult to understand and complete the exercise. One of the things that the in-tray exercise is trying to assess is your ability to work under pressure. Therefore, it's completely normal to feel nervous before and during the assessment. However, it's important not to turn those nerves into stress. Here are some things to bear in mind when trying to maintain composure during the in-tray exercise. First, everything you need is in front of you. Unlike other tests, where you might need to revise specific facts in order to pass, there are no such requirements in an in-tray exercise. In-tray is not judging what you know, it's judging how you think. Take a few slow, deep breaths and start reading through the information that you've been provided. Secondly, you're capable. If the employer didn't think you'd be up to the task of in-tray, the likelihood is that you would not have made it this far in the application process. In-tray isn't necessarily about passing or failing, it's more about getting information on how you work. Therefore, just be sure to be as calm as possible while you complete it. And finally, don't panic if you miss a deadline. Missing a deadline is far from preferable, but don't let it completely knock you on tilt afterwards. One missed deadline can have a psychological snowball effect as you become more and more panicked. This will make matters worse. If a deadline is missed, try to complete the task anyway, and then move on to the next one as normal.